Okay, so everybody should have something that looks like this, yes? Good. All right, so now think back to what we did yesterday and the day before. Yesterday we made proteins, nucleic acids. The day before we made carbohydrates. Can we take this molecule that you've made, go to a table, and bond them together? Does it look like we have a place to make a nice straight line like we did with the DNA and the protein and the carbohydrates? We really don't. We don't have that. So, if we're talking about lipids and the structure for lipids, lipids don't really have a monomer. And what's a monomer? One what? One single unit. Lipids don't really have a monomer because in order to have a monomer, you have to be able to make a polymer. And so we can't connect a whole bunch of these guys together. So we cannot make a polymer. So what's a polymer then? Many units that are bonded together. So for lipids, there is no monomer, there is no polymer. We just have different kinds of lipids. We're doing this a little bit backwards. So what I want you to do now is I want you to think. We can break each one of these little pieces off and have it be its own fatty acid chain. It's basically its own lipid. This is a glycerol molecule up here, and so this would be a molecule, and then these three would be a molecule. So, and this will be a little bit easier for people that were here, but I have faith in you guys. I want you to make water molecules, and as many water molecules as you feel that you need to make those four different molecules, those four different lipids, the glycerol and the fatty acids. So make as many water molecules as you think that you need to make your glycerol molecule and three separate individual fatty acid chains.
So we break these apart, isn't it?
Don't break your lipid apart necessarily unless you need it in order to figure out what you're doing. But make sure that when I'm back up here again that it looks like this. But you're making water molecules. How many water molecules do you need to break the lipid of the saturated fat essentially that we have? So that we have our glycerol molecule and three fatty acid chains. Once you've made the water molecules that you think you need, put all the rest of your pieces back in the Ziploc bag. Once you've made the water molecules that you feel you need, put all your extra pieces back in the little Ziploc bag. You won't need those. So, is this a water molecule? Then go ahead and make them. Yeah, go ahead and make the actual molecule. No, don't tear your lipid apart.
But I'm just wrong.
But so what's a water molecule? What's the chemical formula for a water molecule? you have that for water molecule?
Okay, yeah.
Why is this a water molecule?
Two different flows.
Yes, and so we followed all the rules, nothing dangling, nothing open, and water is H2O, so I have two H's, O, H2O. Okay, so when we've talked about the other macromolecules, we know that we can't just take something apart and just leave it apart. Because according to our laws of matter, we can't have any open ends, we can't have any dangly ends because they want to form bonds. So we need to have everything that's bonded that wants to be bonded. Okay, so this is our lipid molecule. Why did I have you make water? What's the point of that?
That way they can break apart.
Okay, so what does water have to do with breaking apart? Because that's the process of hydrolysis. In order to digest this lipid, in order to break this lipid down, we have to add water in order to break it into those components. So that's the process of hydrolysis. Hydrolysis, lysis, breaking things apart, water, hydrolysis. Okay, so now whatever water molecules that you used, go ahead and test your theory. Let's see if you had enough or too many or not enough. Go ahead and digest your lipid down and make the glycerol, the rectangle across the top, and then the three long, skinny fatty acid chains. And then make sure that you're following laws of conservation matter. You can't take anything additional out of your Ziploc bag. You can't, or you shouldn't have anything left over besides those four molecules. So, how many water molecules did we need? So did you have extra?
Yeah, I wanted to be more safe than sorry.
Oh.
I wasn't for sure. I was kind of scared.
Don't ever be scared. Alright, so we only needed 3 water molecules because each water molecule is breaking each one of these little bonds at each one of these spots right here. So hydrolysis. That gave us our glycerol and our fatty acid chains. Alright, go ahead and put your lipid back together. Go ahead. And what is the oh wait, I'm sorry. Hang on just a second. Okay. Whenever you now, I got a little spiel here and I just got ahead of myself. Whenever you now put your stuff back together, this is going to be here, this is going to be there. Whenever you put your fatty acid chain back on the glycerol, what are you going to have to do? Yes, condensation something or something. Dehydration, synthesis, condensation reaction, because what are we doing? Because we're taking, you have to now remove that water. You have to take the water out in order to bond that together. All right, go through condensation reaction. Okie doke. Once you have your lipid molecule back converted back here on the front table,
Now I'm just holding on that.
Well,
I feel you, Dixie. Trust me.
all right. So like I said, we can't bond those guys together. We don't have that extra little piece and extra little place where we can do that. Because even if I take this apart, now I've got something that I can stick it to. But the only thing I can stick it to is the other part of the glycerol molecule. However, we can pack these guys pretty close together, right? So these are lipids. This would represent a saturated fat. Saturated fats happen to be fats that are solid at room temperature. So you make ribs or something like that, and then you leave the plate out, leave the container out or something, or bacon is a perfect example because everybody's pretty familiar with bacon. Bacon in a pan, and then that pan's got the white solid fat in it after you let it cool back down, right? Saturated fat, usually animal fats, those kind of things. They can pack together at room temperature. They can pack together at room temperature because they're following the laws of matter. So as things cool down, the atoms get closer together. That's happening with anything else. So think about water. Water molecules in an ice cube are packed really close together, and that's what makes it solid. You put that ice cube on a table, well, there's enough energy, enough heat energy in the table and the air around it that it can absorb it, and those little water molecules are going to spread out just a little bit, and they've got more room to move around them, and that makes them a liquid. So that water molecule in a pan, you put it on a stove and you boil it, and it turns into a gas. Well, the water's still there. The water molecules are still there. The two cute little white and red little thing, it's still there. But now they're just so spread out that you can't see them. Water and ice, they're close enough together we can see them. Now they're so spread out and they have so much energy they're bouncing around. You take that air that's got a lot of humidity in it, and then you cool that air down, and you've got condensation, so it's going to condense on a surface and turn back to a liquid. Cool it down enough, then it's going to freeze into a solid. So that's kind of what we're doing. The animal fat as a liquid, the molecules are spread out a little bit more. We cool them down, they're going to pack together as a solid, and they're going to be able to form a solid. All right, grab your molecule if you know where it's at. And I want you to take one of the fatty acid chains. Oh, yeah, don't go anywhere with it. I'm not done. I still have more stuff to do. Grab one of the fatty acid chains off one of the ends and replace it with one of these fatty acid chains. So grab a fatty acid chain off one of the ends of your molecule and replace it with one of these guys. Oh, did you not have one? Well, how did I do that? I can't count that sound. Really? Am I that bad at math? Everybody else have one? Okay. All right, so take a look at the little crooked one. It's gonna ruin my whole spiel here. There you go. That's gonna make things better. Take a look at the crooked one. How's the crooked one different from the straight one? Besides being crooked and straight.
there's no matrix.
Okay.
It's more yellow.
Okay, and hold on to that thought for just a minute. We're gonna look at that in just a second. But structurally speaking, so let's focus on what Dixie said and the fact that like there's H is missing, right? So in that spot right there, what else do you notice?
Of the two line thingies.
Yes. So what do the line thingies represent? What does it represent?
A bond.
Okay, any of the line thingies represent a bond. If we have two line thingies, that's a double bond. So we have like two bonds, it's a stronger bond right in that same spot. So what is that double bond doing to the structure of the fatty acid? Yes, how? Okay, what's it doing with the shape of it? It's making it bend. That's what's putting that bend in there, is that double bond right there. So that double bond puts that kink in there, and that's done that to our molecule. So now, oh shit, okay, how far can we pack them together?
No.
Okay, not too bad. I did like this a little bit better because it might make things a little bit more visual. Alright, so we've got one of these with a double bond in it. Okay, so we're going from approximately here to approximately there. I should have done that one first. I'm all off today. So, you know, they can't pack as closely together. So these are going to be our unsaturated fats. These are the guys that are liquid even at room temperature. Now, eventually, obviously, because we were kind of doing like this, you know, eventually we can turn it into a solid, but you have to get it really, really, really cold in order to force them to pack together. At room temperature, there's not enough energy for that to happen, so they're going to still be a little bit apart. So this might be like your olive oil. So olive oil in the bottle, cooking oil, vegetable oil, stuff like that is liquid at room temperature. Well, this is probably not, because it's an unsaturated fat and it's got that little double bond. All right, let's see how visually you take it. All right, go ahead and swap it back and let's see the difference in how it's back. Right, so an obvious difference, and in fact, we did have room between those others, and we're now able to pack it a little bit closer together. Saturated fat, solid at room temperature. Unsaturated fat is not solid at room temperature because it can't pack as closely together. It can't pack as closely together because of that little kink, and what causes that little bend in the saturated fat? The double bond between a couple of the carbons. All right, let's take some notes. All right, so I put this on the bottom of my nucleic acids. You can put it on a separate page if you want. It really doesn't matter. You put it whatever's best for your notes. There's really not a whole lot of stuff there, about a half a page worth, but do what you need to do.
Nucleic acids is above it, right?
Yes, in mine, I have nucleic acids above it, but you can put it on a separate page if you need to. All right, so there are no monomer, polymer, structural kind of things for lipids. However, carbohydrates do have a monomer. What was the name, the word that we gave to carbohydrate monomer? No, no, no. That is the bond. You were correct in saying that. That's not the monomer. So monomer we said was a single unit. So what was the name we gave to the single unit for a carbohydrate? Glucose is an example of it. What was the name? Monosaccharide is the name because glucose is an example of a monosaccharide. For proteins do have a monomer. What's the name of the monomer for protein? amino acid is the monomer for a protein. Nucleic acids do have monomers. What's the name of the monomer for nucleic acids? Nucleotide is a monomer for nucleic acids. Oh, dang it, I gave that away. Atoms that were a clue that what you're looking at is a carbohydrate. What were the atoms, the elements, sorry, elements? CHO, CHO for carbohydrate. Protein? That's nucleic acid. So carbohydrate is CHO, proteins is CHON, CHON, and then we add phosphate for nucleic acid because nucleic acid DNA has the phosphate group. That's why the P is in that one. Now, sometimes there's some sulfur thrown in, as well for proteins, but for us and our level, we're just going to keep it nice and simple. So CHO for sugars, CHON for proteins, CHON for our nucleic acids. Lipids are also carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So it might be easy to confuse lipids with carbohydrates, and here's how you would probably tell them apart. Is that for carbohydrates, think back to your diagram for carbohydrates. How many carbons was in our carbohydrates? 6, or what's another possibility? 6 or 5. So we have 5 carbon sugars and we have 6 carbon sugars. With me? Makes sense? So even if it's in the linear chain form for a carbohydrate and a lipid and you're comparing it, carbohydrates are either 5 carbon sugars or 6 carbon sugars. So you're going to have 5 carbons or 6 carbons. How many carbons do I have on this? More than 5 or 6? Sure. More than 5 or 6. So that's a good clue that if it's just CHO, but you've got a long chain on there, that it's a lipid rather than a carbohydrate. Also, your carbohydrates, they're going to form the ring whenever they're in an aqueous environment, whereas we don't have that kind of necessarily structure for our lipids. The bonds in lipids are called ester linkages. There are 18 carbons. Did you count them, or was that just random?
No, just wait.
There's 18.
That's what I just counted.
Okay, so when it says bond, what bond are we talking about? No, not that one.
Oh, like a covalent or hydrogen?
It is an example of a covalent bond. What's the process that's forming the ester linkages? Dehydration synthesis or
Condensation.
okay. So it's the same process in all of our macromolecules. We're removing water to bond something on there, but they've got a special name for each one. For lipids, ester linkages. What was it for carbohydrates? Oh, you just told me. Glycosidic linkage. What is it for proteins? Peptide bond. What is it for nucleic acids?
Oh, that's a long one.
Yep. Phosphodiester. No, I can't even say it. Phosphodiester. That doesn't sound good. Phosphodiester. Phosphodiester linkage. Okay, so peptide bond for proteins, that's pretty easy to remember, right? Peptide bond protein. Glycosidic linkage, glycogen, glucose, probably for carbohydrates. Phosphodiester, good luck. But if that's the only one you have to remember, and that's the really long one. So ester linkage, so ester lipids, ester I think of, like the chubby old grandma giving you cookies and stuff like that. So that helps me remember ester linkages for lipids. Do what you do to help you remember. Function of lipids. The biggest function of lipids, is energy storage. We've also talked about the importance of lipids, even though they get a bad rap, in the fact that they're important for protection, and they insulate our internal organs. We have a layer of fat underneath our skin, which is important for temperature control there. They are a component of cell membranes because cholesterol is a lipid. So it's very important for cell membranes. They are a component of hormones. So function is the job. Way back when we talked about diabetes, we talked about ketoacidosis. So in diabetes, you might produce insulin or you don't produce any insulin at all, but you have sugar in the bloodstream that can't make it into the cell for one reason or another. Well, everything in the cell has to keep working, like us. We just gotta keep going, gotta keep working. But if you don't have the sugar in order to power all the functions in the cell in order to keep working, we gotta get energy somewhere. So the cell says, all right, start burning fat. So fat has a high energy content. The only problem is that when you digest fat, when you break fat down, that you're producing ketones. And ketones is a dangerous acidic product. So you have too much of that, and it makes your blood acidic, it makes the cells acidic. If things are too acidic, it's going to have a chemical reaction and it's going to destroy those things. So that's not good. So people that go through ketoacidosis, that's a bad condition, and they've got to get that taken care of. Got to get that sugar into the cells, because when we burn sugar, it burns clean, if you will. There's like no pollutants. But if you're burning fat, you've got those pollutants, those ketones that are created. And so we don't want that. Now, we all naturally go through a little bit of ketoacidosis overnight, because we go for big, long strands of time without eating anything. But people that are diabetic, that's day after day after day. That's much longer than, say, 8 hours. So function is job. Function of lipids, main one is energy storage, but also protection, insulation, hormones, cell membranes. What's the function of carbohydrates? What's the job of carbohydrates, the main job? Store energy is important, but there's one that's importanter. So structure is important, but there's one that's importanter. Energy. The most important function of carbohydrates is they provide our energy to our cells. That's where we get our main source of energy from. So carbohydrates function, its job, energy, and then yes, as glycogen, there is some storage, and yes, as the chitin, there is some structural aspects to it. What is the main function of nucleic acids? Hereditary information. Hang on to that information, get it where it needs to go. So it's DNA, RNA, that's what it's important for. Main functions of proteins.
Control reactions in cells.
Okay, the most important one probably is control reactions in cells, because the things that control reactions in cells are enzymes. They're catalysts, speed up, slow down reactions. Also, there's tons of other functions for them. Structural is another important function for them as well. All right, so in carbohydrates, we have monomers that are monosaccharides, but we have different kinds of monosaccharides. We have amino acids in proteins, that is the monomer for proteins. And how many different amino acids are there?
26.
That's letters of the alphabet, and I compared it to. Okay, so there's 20 different amino acids. In nucleic acids, do we have different types of nucleic acids? Yes, we do. Do you remember what they are? The two main ones? DNA and RNA are the main ones, and even with RNA, we have messenger RNA and transfer RNA and ribosomal RNA. So with lipids, same thing. We've got some major differences, different kinds of structural differences for lipids. So these guys probably look familiar to you, because this is what we just made. We made saturated fats and unsaturated fats. Hopefully this dude looks familiar as well, although before we just drew it as a little jellyfish with 2 legs. But this is like a component of a cell membrane. So phospholipids are a part of lipid. Saturated fats are a type of lipid, or are classified as lipids. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
What is the G word?
Glycerol, Glycerol. Okay, as soon as you get that copied down, come grab your lipid. Make sure you break down all of the pieces and put them back in a Ziploc bag. Oh, and I did forget you took a picture. And then I gave you a little lipid picture that you can tape on top of there, give you a little bit more visual. All right, so while you're breaking down your pieces and putting them back in the Ziploc bag, you guys have about, we'll have a little bit over 30 minutes. I'm going to stop you at 10:05 for another review again. But the review went a little bit better yesterday because now we're able to find things in our notes a little bit better. So I'm optimistic. So once I get finished with my little song and dance, great thing to do would be if you have not done that 1, 2, 3 reflection, get that done, knock that out, show it to me, let me read over it, give you the score for that. Then finish up the reflection for the DNA detectives, the DNA analysts. And I mean, this is a job that's still in high demand and they're a really good job. So we got a lot of cancer that runs in my family. So I just sent information in for cancer clusters. And they bill like almost $7,000 for the test. I mean, that's not even like the whole genetic for blah, blah stuff. But it's like $7,000 for the whole test. Now, luckily, my insurance covers a lot of that just simply because I have a lot of risk factors within our family, so that's great. But that still would have gone down to almost like $1,200 on my part, over $1,200 on my part to pay for that test if I didn't have other factors on there. So that's a lot of money. And what you're doing for this job is you're letting the machines do most of it. So you're running gels maybe, or running analysis through computers and stuff like that, and you're just processing the information and sending it on to the doctor and writing up a report. So once again, that seems like it's a nice, really antisocial kind of position if that's what you're interested in. But if you're interested in the more social part of it, then you could be the genetic counselor. So you get that information, you talk to the patient and tell them what all these little beeps and boops mean on this, and how is that going to affect your screening, throughout the rest of your life. So that reflection as well. So nothing else to be turned in necessarily anytime soon. I went ahead and put out so that you're keeping track of it. Course file checks coming up. Unit 1 test is coming up. I always reserve the right to change those, but for right now, that's what we're looking at. And so keep that stuff in mind. You have a rubric on Canvas, go through it and make sure you have everything on there and can check that stuff off. You might have more, that's great, but make sure you have what's on the rubric because that's what's going to be graded. If you've got extra time, why not get the abstract done, get it out of the way. You can still do extra credit abstracts. Spring semester is crazy. Anything that you can have done ahead of time and not have to worry about it the day before, the night before, 11:59 before it's due is a bonus. Take care of business, get stuff done, get stuff knocked down. All right, any questions about what you need? All right, have at it.